well, I didn't want to be just a general practitioner. I wanted to have an area of specialty, and so I chose that area of specialty to be integrative medicine.
Hello, and thank you for joining us again on Mind Body Medicine with myself, Sarah Dawkins, and my guest today is Dr. Jen Draper, who is also a former medic. She's spent nearly 30 years in the healthcare system, and she recognized that subtle dependency model that system created. Today, Jen's work helps high-performing professionals recalibrate their nervous system, reorganize survival-based identity structures, and reclaim their regulated clarity. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me as your guest, Sarah. I'm honoured to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And today this podcast is going to be a little bit different because although Jen has healed herself, and we can talk about that, we're going to talk about our experiences within the medical model and what helped us both to step away from that and become the coaches that we are today, doing a total 180 of our beliefs. So Jen, what do you want to share your story with us?
Sure. Well, I guess where do I start? Always the $1 million question, isn't it? Yeah. So in recent years, I became aware of a change in my day-to-day functioning, whereas for many, many years it had been so easy for me to just let things flow and have a daily routine and get up in the morning and be organised, ready for work. There came a time when I noticed that it was getting more and more difficult to keep those routines going. And accompanying that change in my level of functioning, I also had a number of physical symptoms. And these were happening in the context of being a solo general practitioner, leader of a multidisciplinary team in a private clinic in rural New South Wales in Australia. And I had been running that clinic at that time for probably close to 10 years, maybe 11 or so. And the physical symptoms that I started observing within myself was a difficulty in getting out of bed and getting motivated in the morning, and incredible pain with every step in my feet. And I definitely have I'm going to use the word battled because it has been somewhat of a battle with excessive weight through my life. And it's been somewhat of a yo-yo pattern that I recognise with the benefit of hindsight has mirrored my emotional state at different times. And yes, my weight had been increasing. And so, of course, physician heal thyself, as you do. I self-diagnosed with the condition known as plantar fasciitis, which is a very painful condition where the soles of the feet are inflamed, and untreated and in its sort of relapsing and remitting nature, it leads to heel spurs. And and that, of course, had also been in my family. My grandfather had that. And I had seen many patients through my years with heel spurs, with plantar fasciitis. So that's what I knew was going on. And of course, I tried all sorts of different remedies and things to heal myself. And eventually, fast forwarding, things catapulted and cascaded, and I did take time away from being on call 24/7 in and working 5 days a week in the practice, and I had a series of injections of platelet-rich plasma into my feet, which did provide some temporary relief at the time. But it wasn't until I actually finally stepped away and closed the door on my busy clinic with somewhat amounts of regret at that time that I finally had relief from those symptoms. And my interpretation, with the benefit of the retrospectoscope, which is a word that I love to use, was that each step that I was taking was the wrong path for me at that time. And it was only once I recalibrated my path that my foot pain actually eased at all. So, yeah, so that's kind of the guts of it. Of course, there was a lot of accompanying mental health distress at the time as well. As you would imagine, having been on call 24/7 in a clinical practice, which by the time I ended up closing had been nearly 15 years in a solo general practice that I had founded and built from scratch, and was very proud of the model. But that's another part of the story. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear you, because I went through that same mental battle of, if I leave my job as a nurse, first and foremost, who am I? Because my whole being was around Sarah the nurse. And so that in itself became a challenge on top of the health problems. Did you find that? Or were you...
Absolutely. No, my identity had been incredibly wrapped up in Dr. Jen. And of course, when you study for so long and then you're given that prefix before your name, it's somewhat difficult to relinquish. And I've had many people say to me, well, you don't need to, you just do need to qualify the fact that you are no longer practicing and you're non-registered. So in Australia, there are very, very rigid guidelines as to when you can use the title, and you certainly can. All my identification is all printed with it on it. So, and I actually, the story of my name was that Draper was not my maiden name, but I first started working as a doctor on the 8th of January 1996, and I was married 2 days before that. And that was perhaps somewhat to do with obtaining that name, as opposed to my maiden name, which was very much unpronounceable. But anyway, there's another story associated with that as well too. All of those stored emotions which you accumulate along the way and which contribute towards the identity that you build and define. So, yeah.
Yes, and that's a huge conversation to have there around beliefs and identity. We become who we believe we need to be to fit into the situations and with the people that we find ourselves with. And they just layer on top of who we are at our core, to quite often to the point, like myself, I didn't know who I was because I'd layered so much on top of who I was originally as a child. And the adult was nothing like who I was as a child.
Yeah, and we're so close to source when we're born. Source, God, the universe. I don't differentiate between whatever name people choose to refer to, the higher power that is so much greater than all of us. And that is part of us, that, and that awareness of the oneness and things being so much more than just our existence in this 3D reality is something that I feel that children are so much closer to, and, so imaginative and so creative and so innocent, as opposed to having been accumulating all of the various toxicities and experiences that life brings about, least of which is those that come from being born into that family of origin, and the lessons that come about. I really, really do believe that we as souls go through this particular timeline, and we are presented with these lessons. And when we recognize these recurring patterns, then here is yet another opportunity for you to not learn that lesson in a punitive sort of manner, but in a curious manner. And so having, as I was alluding to beforehand, with that journey of the weight battle, I think whilstsoever it is a battle for me, it will continue to be being presented to me as a challenge. And once I accept that I don't need to keep fighting anymore, I'm sure that will be the day when it just, falls away and it's not a struggle or a battle any longer for me. So, yeah, but I very much agree. I, as a child, found that role of becoming the doctor very early on in those childhood games that I would play, and there'd be doctors and nurses in the street, and I was never the nurse, I was always the doctor. So, yes.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I was always the nurse.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so we've both got that empathic, caring, nurturing part within our nature. And just to go back to the suffering that we go through and where it takes us to, I love a quote by Peter Crone. And he says, if the past, as in if it could have been different, it would have been different. But I totally agree, like you, that we're on our soul's journey to learn these lessons. And I truly believe that our soul chose this life, this family, how our life was going to pan out because of the lessons it could learn within it. And you're right, it's not a punitive thing. We need to look at them, the things that we've been through. There's a lesson, but there's also a blessing, because with yourself and myself, what we went through and struggled and suffered with in that medical model helped us to step away from it to become the people we are now, by doing all of that healing work, that inner work, that outer work, to find who we are at our core. And that involves some of that stripping away of all those layers that we've put on, to understand the struggles that we've been through, to quantify what the lesson and the blessing was within those, so that if they come around again, we'll recognize that maybe we didn't deal with 100% of it in that previous experience. So something different will come that will help us to recognize what is still within us that needs to come up for healing.
Yeah. And is it necessarily healing, or is it just learning and just curiosity and uncovering? Because the concept of the ultimate health it's a perception that I think is altered through your own lens, and especially with the changing of epigenetics, with the longer periods of time that people are living, and being on this planet in this one lifetime, that each one that we are consciously aware of, if we constrain ourselves to within the paradigm of the birth date and the life in this lifetime, which of course at the present level of work that I do, I don't constrain myself to, but within the medical model, I did have to constrain myself, because within the confines of a consultation room, you do not have time to do any exploration of past lives, let alone past family history. Even that, takes up enough of the contribution to the story that the picture that you're putting together about that individual in front of you. And I guess I was really blessed in that my path as a doctor took me down avenues which were outside of that which I was trained as a general practitioner in, because I decided probably about 20 years before I stopped, so 10 years into my medical career, that being a general practitioner, well, I didn't want to be just a general practitioner. I wanted to have an area of specialty, and so I chose that area of specialty to be integrative medicine, which is a field of medicine wherein you take into account the entirety of that individual's existence, their environment, their job, their family, their lifestyle factors, the epigenetics, their toxic exposure. And then you look particularly at things like heavy metal load and microbiome, and where I didn't get to in that field of integrative medicine sufficiently, I believe, was to encompass enough of the Eastern elements, which really now in my own self-healing journey, I recognize that, how naive is Western medicine to just block out all of this Eastern holistic healing that has been around for thousands and thousands of years. Sorry, I shouldn't say naive. I should say how arrogant, because things like Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, and in Australia there is an increasing recognition of these, and they are actually called complementary and alternative medicine. So, but my study of integrative medicine hadn't taken me down that pathway while I was still a registered practitioner. Perhaps if it had of, then, I would have spent a lot more money educating myself, because in Australia, to maintain registration, I'm not sure if it was the same when you were working, that you had to earn a certain number of points to keep your registration. So CPD, or it stands for continuing professional development, but I like to call it continuing pharma dependency, because in the Australian model, at least, if you chose to maintain your registration and you had to get a certain amount of points, the easiest way and the free way to do it was to accept the invitations that you would get from pharmaceutical reps to their education that they would provide to doctors. So I just called them drug dinners, and you would just go along and be given dinner and have to sit there and listen to either one of your peers or one of the local specialists spouting on about some particular clinical condition and, the protocols that you use for treating it. And they'd be tacked on at the beginning and at the end, word from our sponsors kind of thing. And, would you like a set of free steak knives with that? Oh, no, sorry, that goes against Medicines Australia code. So, so this, I have a somewhat perhaps cynical approach to continuing professional development, because I chose fairly early on in my career, like a third of the way through, that I wanted to learn at a deeper level. So I was willing to pay for my education to learn about various esoteric topics like the microbiome and nutrient therapy for mental health, as opposed to drugs for mental health. So, and that was quite an interesting sort of deviation that I took on my path. And it meant that, well, at least at the time, I thought that I was having a more holistic approach to medicine. But little did I know, I was just switching people from one form of dependency into another form of dependency that perhaps those particular pharmaceutical companies didn't make as much money from, but the compounding pharmacists and the other, money earning elements within the sickness industry were earning from. So, yeah, but at the time it kind of seemed a little bit more attractive to me. And I also took, I'm not sure if you did this during your career, Sarah, but I took, having actually experienced mental health issues myself earlier in my life, and I had, sought medical attention, and I had various prescriptions happening, including sertraline, like an anti-anxiety agent, which I was on for many, many years. And I remember very distinctly one time when I think my oldest daughter was maybe 2 at the time, going into the local pharmacy and filling the prescriptions. And one was for the sertraline and the other was for the contraceptive pill. And the very friendly pharmacist kind of just chose to speak up to me and said, I just wonder, if you weren't taking this, do you think you would need this? So he actually, as a pharmacist, to me, a doctor whom practiced just down the road, but he didn't really, maybe I'd filled my script 1 or 2 times, but he actually spoke up about that. And that was, I'd only at that stage, I wasn't even a fully qualified general practitioner. So it was very early in my medical career, and it just stuck with me in my mind. What are you actually referring to? And then years later, when I learnt about the links between nutrients and mental health, and I learnt about this concept of copper toxicity, which by the way, I think is absolute bullshit now, but back then made a lot of sense. I recognise that many women, having been prescribed the contraceptive pill, then developed mental health problems, and that was exactly the path that had happened within me, with that benefit of hindsight. So I was very grateful to that pharmacist for highlighting that. Yeah.
And I love that, because that resonates with my own experience of being a nurse, because we moved to America forever, and within the first year, one of my nurse colleagues challenged my use of pharmaceuticals at home, and that was my equivalent of what happened to you just now, and sent me off looking, well, why would she do that? What else is there? What could be possible?
Yeah.
And it's that whole, what's going on? Because
yeah,
I don't know about yourself, but I was never taught growing up, because I was raised by a nurse. I was never taught about alternative practices and medicine, which actually is really ancient wisdom. You know, that was there way before the Rockefeller medicine came about.
Absolutely.
And so that opened my eyes to what was available. I mean, I knew about physiotherapy because we do that in the hospital, but chiropractors, acupuncture, and stepping away from pharmaceuticals and looking at what else is there, when we can just tweak our diet, our lifestyle, our thoughts, our behaviors. We have the power and ability to do all of that, but we can't do it if we don't know that it's possible for us. Or somebody says, have you even thought about this?
Yes.
No, it wasn't in my sphere of consciousness, but now you've put it there. I'm going to go and look at that.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's just actually having that open mind and being willing to consider that the paradigm that you are perceiving through your narrowed lens is, you just don't know what you don't know. So so that nurse colleague of yours was obviously highly influential for you. So the other experience that I had along the way, which helped me, well, there were two, but the first one that came was probably in around about 2018, I think, and it was actually a patient of mine who had seen that I had taken this journey into nutrient medicine for mental health, and had invested in studying and was qualified to prescribe these very expensive, smelly, compounded medicine formulations that people would take instead of their sertraline, which I did for a period of time, until I realized that if I skipped a dose, or if I skipped 2 doses, oh dear, that was not good. It was a dramatic change in my physiology and my mental health. But this one patient felt confident enough with me as a network marketer herself to actually speak to me and ask me to have a coffee date with her and introduce me to essential oils. And so that was probably, I think it was about 2017 actually. And so I was ordering some essential oils for myself and using them as a replacement, because I attended some of the education sessions that she presented to her people who would purchase essential oils through this network marketing structure. And I learnt that peppermint oil was an alternative to paracetamol. And I was highly aware of paracetamol, already being trained in integrative medicine, as being poisonous, stay away from at all costs. So do you call it paracetamol over there, or do you call it acetaminophen? Yeah. So anyway, that was really wonderful learning about peppermint oil. And so that was one experience that was very helpful for me. The second experience, which really put paid to all of the learnings that I did about nutrient medicine and copper toxicity and this condition called pyroluria. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's quite an interesting little rabbit hole that we can delve into if you're curious. But I don't really ascribe to it anymore, because that was the principle that I was taking all of these supplements for and prescribing supplements for patients who were curious about this and looked for doctors who were trained in this particular modality. And I was listed as one of these doctors. And then, you know, I'd skip my dose and I'd be, so yeah, I don't recommend that anymore. But at the time when I was working in this clinical practice with these allied health people with me, I had a lovely nutritionist working with me who was training as a health promotion officer. And so she would assist people with dietary changes, and we would go down lots of different routes like elimination diets and, you know, low FODMAPs and gluten-free, dairy-free, blah, 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 all of this sort of different alterations in diet under clinical supervision and monitoring of blood markers, etc. I was really, really big on micromanagement there for a long time. Well, because I was a solo GP, in order to try and maintain the semblance of sanity, which didn't eventually hold up, but one of these years when we would regularly close the practice for 2 or 3 weeks over the Christmas break, she went away, and I got this excited email from her before we were due to go back to work, and she shared with me, have you ever heard of root cause protocol? And I'm like, no. Now, so I'm going to say to you, Sarah, have you ever heard of root cause protocol? Yes, you have. Wow. Well, that's fantastic, because this lovely nutritionist had been doing this research over the break away from, and that's such a repeated story, isn't it? That when you have a break away, it's when you start to have the space, the mental capacity to actually look outside the paradigm that you're pigeonholed within. Anyway, she shared it with me, and I watched a couple of the videos and sort of, you know, got this concept in my head, which simplistically for me just made so much sense. And then I said to her, you're realizing this is saying exactly the opposite to what I have been practicing and using with regards to copper toxicity, because it's actually speaking about copper bioavailability and the necessity of that to assist with the iron recycling in your body, which just makes so much sense to me, because I had for many, many years been going back to this nutrient training in mental health and been showing my own blood results to my colleagues and saying, what's causing this? What's causing this? And what I was showing them was a low transferrin, which is the protein that iron is bound to, traveling around the body. And I didn't actually have low iron. You know, the ferritin was quite not elevated, but certainly wasn't low. And the serum iron was quite low. And the doctors would just look at it and say, that's inflammation, that's inflammation. And I'm like, well, but I'm taking all of these pyrrole supplements, and I'm gluten-free, dairy-free, and I'm, you know, meditating, and I'm using frequency devices, and I'm go, on call 24/7. And they're like, it's inflammation. And to learn about root cause protocol and to implement the changes, which, you know, these beautiful, simple stops and starts, stop all multivitamins. So I said to my nutritionist, you mean these smelly, expensive, multiple 14 capsules that I'm taking every day, I can stop? And that just blew me away. But because I am one of these people who, you know, those, yeah, I was prescribing for myself, okay, but they were just vitamins. So it wasn't like a pharmaceutical. They were just these compounded vitamins that I was writing the prescription for. And, you know, consulting with colleagues and like, physician heal thyself. Come on, we all do it. They all do it. The doctors all do it. Okay, letting you in on a little secret here. I'm sure you know it anyway. So I did that. And what I took away from root cause protocol was 2 things. Number 1, magnesium. If you're going to take a supplement, it's pretty well the only thing you need, magnesium. But the number 2, way more difficult, just learn to let things go. And that's really all it is. But I don't know, what's your take on root cause protocol? Do you ascribe to it or?
When I think about root cause protocol, that I know that there is a specific company learning package and everything, but what my take on it is, the work I do with my clients is root cause. I look into, why has your body manifested, produced the symptoms it has? What is the message behind it? Let's look at the root cause of the issue. Let's not just look at the symptom and medicate the symptom like we do in the medical model. Let's look at the symptom as, why has that manifested? Why specifically that symptom? So my root cause protocol is more about helping the clients to understand why they've manifested those symptoms. And we absolutely don't get taught that in the medical model at all. It's like, here's the symptom, or here's the pill for that symptom. Here's another pill to counteract that pill's side effects. And here's another pill to protect your stomach. And then suddenly you're on polypharmacy. Rather than, so what's really going on in your life that needs this symptom to manifest to help you? And that, a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't help me. I've got this pain. I've got this chronic fatigue. I've got this diagnosis. I'm like, it's serving you in some way. It's helping you by helping you to do something or not do something. You know, is it stopping you from being sociable and going out? And it's a good reason for you to not go to that meetup or community event. What is the reason that symptom's showing up? So that's how I determine root cause protocol. I'm not au fait with the actual protocol of what it is, but that's my interpretation and what I do with my clients.
Yeah. And that principle is the principle that underpins integrative medicine. But whatever is the perception that you have and the tools that are within your tool belt as a practitioner who's an integrative practitioner, then you will bring to the table with regards to that individual's root causes. And of course, it's their degrees of insight and ability to look inwards that will expand that, unless you're one of these integrative practitioners, or perhaps, you know, naturopaths or other alternative practitioners who has this narrow kind of toolkit and attacks each individual from this process. Like at one stage within my multidisciplinary practice, I had a naturopath who came and worked with us, and every single patient that she saw got popped on a blood group diet, had a kind of dubious test for dysbiosis called an Indican, which was one of the testing modalities that was brought out by a certain pharmaceutical stroke natural pharmaceutical company that she had an account with. So she got that testing and did this little urine test, and then would match it up with the different colors, and then there'd be your pH with a pH meter and all of this, and it was just this protocol, and every single patient got put on this little cocktail which she called citric bicarb, which was a mixture of a bicarbonate of soda and citric acid with a little bit of water that they would drink religiously each day. So that's what I'm saying about whatever lens or whatever bias you have. As an individual practitioner, you can't take that away, and that will change through your career. And that's because we're all individuals. And I feel that just having a curiosity and an awareness, there's no judgment. There's room for all types, and there's all types of healers and all types of professionals. And I feel like the medical model or the sickness industry supports you doing it in a particular way, and you know, you've got to keep it within these kind of parameters. If you stray outside, then you don't fit in our model, and we won't allow you to be registered and call yourself whatever practitioner, etc. And obviously, you know, the public does need some kind of degree of not so much protection, but more a safety netting for if things go wrong, because things do go wrong. And, you know, I feel like society encourages so steadfastly there's got to be a sequence of events for blame. And what misses from within that sequence of events is any degree of self-responsibility. And so I believe that self-responsibility needs to come first. And that, in a general practice medical model, they walk in on their own 2 feet, then they've got to walk in on their own 2 feet. So that's a degree of self-responsibility. And so my original concept when I founded this practice that ran for nearly 15 years before I had to walk away was somewhat complicated. In fact, somewhat is completely wrong. It was super complicated, and it was based upon this model of that I felt that with all of the extra study that I had done to look at things from a holistic perspective, although now I realize it was a very narrow frame, but I thought it was holistic, that I would encourage people, also running a business to work out some kind of a business model, that I would encourage people to come for a regular preventative checkup. So I came from this place of innocence that, oh yes, we can keep people healthy and well. As a doctor, hold on a second, healthy, well people don't go to the doctor, love. Like, nobody bothered to tell me that before, because nobody told me to do things this way. It all came out of my brain of that, let's do this. And I just did it. And I just poured in my own funds into it. And I came up with the models and the protocols. And I actually even had this model, which was a little bit like a gym membership, where my patients would pay me an annual amount of money to belong to the medical practice and kind of have a spot. And how I structured my day from the very beginning was I wasn't just the only team member. I had receptionists, then I had a technician who would, take their vitals and give me a bit of a rundown of why they were there. And we had multiple rooms, and we had different team members all doing different parts of what is the general practitioner's job, because I recognized that general practitioners are generalists, and I knew that my skill set was not in speaking to people all about their nutrition. So I had a nutritionist, and I, had counselors, and I had naturopaths, and all these people working together in a team mechanism. But the business model that underpinned it mainly was the membership model. And for that, that would then allow me to split my day into 50-50 time. 50% of the time were booked appointments, where people would be booked in for their regular checkouts, and they were checkups. That was a bit of a Freudian, but it fits. And that actually worked using this model that the Australian healthcare system had brought into play not long before I'd actually started the model and conceived it within my brain. And probably where it sort of came from was it was an amalgamation from what would happen when you went to the emergency department. You would be triaged and then put to wait in another room and sort of move through. The clinicians would move through with you staying in the one spot. And also I knew of some specialists who had a model like that, where a nurse would kind of do a questionnaire and get the patient ready to be examined, and then the doctor would come in. So they'd kind of play tag team. So it was efficient use of the clinical interaction. And I was very aware that people would say different things to different people. So, and that became very evident through the model. People would say one thing at the front counter, then they'd say something different to the technician, then they'd say something different to the doctor, and people would say what they thought you wanted them to say. So, but anyway, needless to say, this became a lovely medical family with, very dedicated patients, and quite acceptable, like they were well trained. Even though I was on call 24/7, I rarely had a phone call, because people knew that if they were a subscriber, which is the membership model, then they could be pretty well guaranteed to be seen the very next day when we were open in this 50% unbooked time. And being general practice, if it was an emergency like severe abdominal pain, or they broke a bone, or needed stitches or things. Sometimes I would occasionally get calls out of hours for those things, but the main hospital for our local area was 15 minutes drive down the road. So they would mostly go and hassle them. It would only be if there were sort of nuances to do with that presentation that they would want to speak to their doctor. And that was what it was. I was owned by them. I very much felt that. Did you feel that when you were a clinician, that there was sort of like, oh, they're my patients and you're my doctor? Did that come into your role?
Maybe not. Yes, I was their nurse for that shift, but
yeah,
I wasn't always put back in the same position with the same patients on every shift. So sometimes I would move to the other side of the ward and go into cardiology. So what were my patients yesterday were no longer my patients today. But then I moved from that into cardiothoracic recovery. So realistically, my patients weren't my patients very long, that for as long as they woke up and were settled and comfortable, and then I got them back to the ward.
Yeah, well, you were working in tertiary care, whereas I was working in primary care. So the difference being that primary care is that they walk in and get in there under their own steam. Tertiary care, they've already been through many, many hoops before they're ending up in a cardiothoracic ward. They've actually been cut open and had all of that bit done. So yeah, very different. And that continuity of care that primary care is and gives is so different to the episodic, time-limited, acute nature of the medicine that you practice within. And I think that's also very pertinent to be thinking about the perspective of, that flawed perspective that I had of creating a primary care model, thinking that you can keep people healthy and well. Because during general practice training, and, I became a medical, like a GP supervisor, I would train registrar doctors. So that's the model that we have for like specializing. So general practice is actually a specialty. And so when I was teaching registrars, I would be encouraged by the Supervisors Association to be including preventative care in at every part. And, this was another thing that I wanted to touch upon, because it's another encouragement of dependence on the system and the sickness system, because they're actively looking for problems. That's what they call preventative care. And outsourcing that completely from the ability of that individual to feel into how they are functioning themselves. And it's getting back to this concept we started speaking about what is health. That perception of what is health for you, what is your level of functioning, what is your expectation that for you. And, some people that I now spend time with will be saying, well, why would you have any expectations? Why can't you just be? And, they're at that kind of a level where the expectations are into the future, and that's what the system is designed for. It doesn't encourage us to just be and let time go and enjoy each moment in the now. And I recognize that timeline that our souls are on, that it is such a powerful thing when you are able to gain that bird's eye view and recognize that, quantum physics is a real thing, and that here we are with these different timelines, and that you may be on one at the moment that needs collapsing. Well, you've got the power to do it. And, this, like you were speaking about, we were speaking before we started talking actually about those books that we both enjoyed, and I was holding up this one, this Secret Language of the Body by Ina Segal. And the interesting thing was, this was a book that was given to me by a woman who, when I was working, became my patient through this convoluted, complicated system that I had created, because there was very low patient turnover. And of course, with me working, I mean, I was working 50 hours a week, but I dropped it down to 40 hours a week for 10-hour days, a year or so before I finished. People couldn't just come onto the books because we had this membership system, and there was like, unless someone died or left, then, your spot wasn't there. So it was, but I had a waiting list, and people knew that if they wanted to come see me, they had to put their name down on the waiting list. And then we had this system that we would take them through, and it was very thorough, but it was all just so programmed into them giving up their power to me and the system, and trusting that I had their best interests at heart. And because I really did feel that I did, until I recognized that I didn't, because I was keeping them in this model of dependence. And I really did not get that until very close to when I just couldn't do it anymore, because I was recognizing that I was looping, and I was looping them, and I wasn't doing them any favors. I was literally a businesswoman when here I was thinking I was intending to be a healer. And then I realized that you don't actually need anybody else to heal yourself, unless it's something that you can't do yourself, like you need both your hands to reset a broken arm or something like that. But there's so much that you can do for yourself. And when your body is giving you some kind of a pattern that is repeated over and over, opening your mind to the possibility that there's a lesson there for you to be learned, or perhaps there's some, as you say, root cause or stored emotion or soul lesson that needs to be learned. And so when this lady who had become my patient, after having jumped through all of the hoops to get to see me, and then when I really wasn't doing too well in those last few years, she actually was a Bowen practitioner, and she offered to, give me some treatments. And when I went and had some Bowen with her for some of my foot troubles and things, she showed me this book and shared it with me. And I was just looking up to find feet or plantar fasciitis within here, but yes, I found feet. So I'm just going to read from the section that says feet. And it's sometimes I feel when I get this book out, it's a little bit like a party trick, because you read it and you're like, my goodness, can there really be that much resonance? But this is what it says underneath feet. Moving in the wrong direction, ignoring your intuition, feeling confused, lost, ungrounded, or out of touch with reality. I'm like, yes, I think that this book is speaking to me. Then, here I was, having felt so bad for so many years, indecisiveness, getting cold feet about a situation. So it was very helpful, and I'm extremely grateful that she introduced me to this. And then I recognized that, then I had the nutritionist telling me about this real root cause protocol, which they have trademarked and, went all through. But it's basically all about the philosophy that, all these multivitamins, people think, oh, you can just take multivitamins, you can have a bad diet and then out supplement it with multivitamins. Well, the dear old chap who this whole paradigm came to, he's actually an epidemiologist. He noticed when he was looking at population studies that the healthiest or the lowest rates of disease, depends on what your definition of health is, but lowest rates of chronic disease like heart disease and cancers and things like that were in populations wherein they had a high percentage of whole blood donors. So when to get rid of iron from your body, basically there's only one modality, and that's losing blood. So this whole concept of iron deficiency anemia, which they say, you could have iron deficiency anemia, we'd better better supplement against that. And we put all these nursing mothers on iron and all of these things. Well, he speaks about in his root cause protocol, which is all about keeping the iron recirculating so that we can carry oxygen in our red blood cells around our body to support good energy production. He speaks about getting a rare earth magnet and using it to test multivitamins. And if you put a magnet up against a multivitamin, you'll notice that it actually moves because it's ferromagnetic. It's literally got iron filings inside it. And you can do the same thing with like breakfast cereals because they're fortified. So for our own benefit in this nanny state that we live in, with this hypothetical condition, iron deficiency anemia, that they need to give everybody iron filings to prevent them getting iron deficiency anemia, like it's just once you see these things and you start questioning and being curious, yes, you can go down a heap of rabbit holes trying to out supplement and all of this, or you can start saying, how about I look at actually trusting my body's intuition and paying attention to what signals my body is giving me, especially if they are repeated signals, especially if something happens and then almost like there's a time correlation between your symptoms. Like, every Sunday night you have a migraine, and what happens on the Monday, or school teacher who every end of term has sick days. There's patterns that happen, and yeah, that's what is the lesson that you have got the opportunity to be able to learn from that and then take on board for the purpose of looking after yourself in a way that gives you that full, joyous experience of life that's uninhibited and allows you to be happy and love. So, yeah.
And that's really beautiful, because self-responsibility really is about looking after yourself and making those decisions to make changes in your lifestyle, your thoughts, your behaviors, your diet, for the whole of your life, because it's going to improve your health and well-being, which will potentially improve your longevity. But actually for some, and I was one of those until I was 41 and challenged, it's easy to take a pill, just continue as I am, change nothing, so not be self-responsible at all. And when I've got a symptom, go to the doctor, get a pill or a cream or have an intervention, and I don't need to change anything, which keeps my life my way and easy and what I want to do when I want to do it. But with every choice, there's always an effect. Whatever we choose, there's always an equal and opposite reaction and responsibility for that choice. So taking back responsibility is really a huge mindset shift for a lot of people. It was for me. So I'm stopping outsourcing my health to the doctor now and taking that radical responsibility, because it really is going, actually, I'm about me now. I'm going to listen to my body, make these changes in my life over a long period of time, because I don't want to suffer with, I'm going to say old age in air quotes, symptoms, because those symptoms are as a consequences of choices that we've made in the way we live our lives. And we can stop, ameliorate some of those symptoms from occurring in our body by choosing how we treat ourselves and what we do in our lives. So it totally is about looking long term. There are short term fixes, but they don't last. You're better off looking at what do I need to do? How can I run my life differently to make sure I live to a ripe old age, symptom free, as healthy as I can, flexible, mobile, and living the life my way for me, outside of medicine, because I'm a big proponent for be careful what you look for, because you might find it. You know, I see not so much in the UK, but in America for sure, when I lived there, people are having their annual pap smears and mammograms and blood work done. I'm like, what are you looking for? Well, you can't be too careful. I'm like, well,
yes,
but you might find what you're looking for. And
exactly.
it might also be a false positive. And I know of people who've received treatment based on false positives.
Yeah.
So it's,
I mean, the medical system's all about fear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, keeping people in that fearful state, feeling like they're disconnected from that power, and they need to keep performing and moving into the future and keep functional. And what's going to happen if, what if? It's thinking that you are being proactive, but in actual fact, that puts you into this constant state of reactivity. So it's a real double-edged sword and quite the quandary. And you when you are a registered health professional, you must not diss that at all. Like, that needs to be the party talk. And it's indoctrinated into you from your schooling experience. And I mean, I was speaking with my stepfather at Christmas time, and he was talking about how he's a school teacher, and they all went and did their annual first aid. And what they learnt about first aid is take them to hospital. They didn't learn how to actually do basic first aid. They're like, oh, he's got a stick in his foot. Take him to hospital. Not pull it out and clean the wound, but like completely offload it. And just, it's this putting the blame onto others as opposed to accepting that you actually have got power to make to look after yourself. And and then we can look after others as well too. We don't need to be on a pedestal and, oh, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, well, actually I'm a woman, and I used to work in that role. But like, let's just use our common sense. Let's use our brains before they shrivel up and become pickled and irradiated by all of this EMF that's about us. And our pineal glands are calcified with all of the fluoride that's in our water. And so there's so many environmental toxins out there that, you can go down the rabbit hole and try to mitigate against, etc. Sure, you can definitely do that, but you can then take that to the nth degree. And I strongly believe that the more energy that you put into trying to mitigate against everything, the more energy that you are acknowledging of the existence of that. So which is a complete 180 from how I used to be as an integrative doctor, because I was very much, detailed history, looking at all those environmental toxic exposures, measuring the effects, and wow. And I've got to say that level of relaxation for not doing that my autonomic nervous system, or just call it the nervous system because that's the buzzword, can't say autonomic nervous system, got to abbreviate it to nervous system. And that's okay. I can handle that. It's way calmer as a consequence. So, and way happier and so much more self-regulated. And it's really interesting that you spoke about not outsourcing, because I actually coined a word for that. I call it insourcing. So, and that's my method, the insourcing method, which helps people, instead of to stay patients, to become unpatient. So I have always had this tendency to sort of mix metaphors and smush them together. And I've extended that now in my non-medical career to creating portmanteau words. So I insource and encourage people and support people in insourcing, which is basically taking back your power and recognizing that you are your best source of information, your entire being about you. You are the expert. Not that I like that word either, because experts are has-been drips under pressure. But you are the best authority on you. So if people want to have any kind of take home from listening to me speaking about this, that is my message to you. And I'm not saying don't go see a doctor. Like, sure, go see a doctor if you want to, but they're just going to give you an opinion. And opinions are like assholes. We all have them. So your choice as to whether you want to take that opinion over your own opinion. And, you know, I still, even though I didn't fully comprehend it at the time, the patients that I was able to ask, what do you think's going on with you? And then they knew. They would straight away say they were right. And those ones who were still in that outsourcing paradigm would go, well, I don't know, you're the doctor. I'm like, but you know you. So what's your gut telling you? I know you say you don't know, but if you had to make your best guess, what do you really think's going on? So, yeah.
And that's really beautiful, because what you're saying basically is you're coming home to yourself, because that's where we live, in our body. So thank you for all of that, Jen. I'm well aware that time's creeping on. And where can people find you?
So my website is wellbeingholistic.net. And if you go to wellbeingholistic.net, you will see all of the programs and offerings that I have there on the main page and the product page. And I have written a book, and I have a free human design chart that's available, because I think that's a wonderful curiosity that often opens a lot of interest into learning deeper about yourself and the way that you function. And I'm also on social media, and I do believe that you will be putting the link for my Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube channels all below this episode. So I'm very grateful.
Absolutely, and thank you. And to my listeners, if you enjoyed this, please take a moment and share it with your family and friends and anybody else that you think would gain insight from this. Thank you for listening.